So guys, today I'm talking about the Christmas cactus, and in some cases you may have a slightly different variety, but the care of it is all the same through the different types. It might be called, when you purchase it, you might see a tag that says holiday cactus, Thanksgiving cactus, Christmas cactus, or even Easter cactus. But this care guide that I'm putting together will cover all of those. I purchased my first Christmas cactus over a decade ago, and this one I just recently purchased, and it doesn't take much to keep it healthy, but there's a few critical errors you can make that will quickly send it into decline if you're not careful. I'm going to show you one really interesting way to use a laundry basket to force it to bloom. So although it is called a Christmas cactus, it is not like the standard cactuses we see in the desert Southwest, and it does prefer to be out of direct sunlight. It prefers bright indirect sunlight. So just remember, you can't treat this the same way you would a desert cactus. So you want to make sure that you keep your Christmas cactus out of direct sunlight or a south-facing window, because it can burn the foliage or the leaves. Now, to be more accurate, these are not actually leaves, they're actually flattened stems. So although they look exactly like what you would think of as being a leaf, it's actually the flattened stems of the Christmas cactus. So not to put too fine of a point on it, but you're going to get your best blooms in a bright window or a bright area, but not in direct sunlight. Now, your Christmas cactus, your Easter cactus, and your Thanksgiving cactus, whichever you've purchased, depending on the leaf structure, and I can go over that as well and show you some pictures of what you might be looking for. But you want to do weekly watering, and also, even more important than that, you want to have a soil moisture monitor to make sure you're not overwatering it. So your Christmas cactus will not thrive in wet soils. And matter of fact, if you have a saucer under it or a humidity tray, you want to make sure that it does not stand with water, because if it does, it will damage the plant and it will not thrive in that type of soil environment, because the moisture from those type of humidity and wicking will have a wicking action back up into the soil, and the water will be consistently wet and it will quickly die. So as you monitor your soil, it's okay for it to be slightly damp, and you may want to actually make sure that it completely dries out between watering to make sure that it's in that type of soil environment that it's going to do best. But I'll link one of these down below. It's really a great way to make sure that your soil moisture is consistent all the way down to the bottom of the plant, and you can do that by testing at different depths with a soil monitor. Now, having a humidity sensor in the room where you're growing this cactus is a good idea, because these grow in rainforest areas in South America and Central America. So having an elevated amount of humidity is going to help, and having a sensor close to it will help you know whether or not the air in that area is too dry. So they can tolerate living in a home where there's a lot of dry air. I go ahead and just mist it about once a week with my misting solo sprayer, and it puts a nice light misting on the 3 cactuses I have growing in my garden window. I would recommend one of these solo sprayers because they're so easy to use and they last forever. I have 3 of them around the greenhouse, and I'll put a link to one of these as well. Now, the optimum soil mixture for the Christmas cactus or the other 2 varieties are going to be a cactus mix or a bonsai soil, and I'll put links to both of those at the bottom. But you want to remember, you want something that's fast draining and that does not hold a lot of water, because they do, once again, I said earlier, they do not like to have their roots submerged in very moist soil. Now, this pot is really small, but Christmas cactus can thrive really well in smaller pots. It's okay to up pot them if you want to, but they can survive for a long time in a very small pot. They normally grow in the wild in the crevices of trees and rocks, so they can tolerate really tight areas where their roots can be quite almost what we would consider root bound. Now, since they do grow in a tropical type of environment, you want to make sure that the temperatures don't drop below 65. If that's the case, it could be detrimental to your Christmas cactus, and that's one thing you just want to make sure that you do some temperature monitoring wherever you're keeping it. Also, in a garage or basement, if there's a chance that it might dip below that in the colder months, make sure you bring it inside, because that can do some damage and really cause a lot of drooping. Now, a lot of people will actually plant these outdoors during the warmer months, and I would recommend putting a freeze warning on your phone. If it's going to dip below a certain temperature, you will absolutely kill it. It can probably survive a little bit better below 65 if it's planted into the ground area, but if it's potted and you have it sitting outside, those roots can get quite a bit colder. But remember, it will not survive freezing temperatures. Now, higher humidity will encourage blooms, and you will have a better bloom rate, but you want to make sure that you either have a humidity tray below it. If you do, you want to fill it with gravel where the bottom of the pot is actually out of the water. You don't want it sitting in the water because, again, you'll have that wicking action from your humidity tray into the soil. So just make sure you kind of mound your gravel and it's kind of elevated, but that water around the gravel will evaporate and it will help with the humidity, and your blooming will be a little bit better than it would be if you didn't have the humidity. So once summer has ended, you want to start decreasing the amount of light and maybe move it out of those bright windows and let the hours of darkness increase over the fall months when it approaches its bloom time. So just remember that that window is going to be your enemy once summer has ended, and you want to see blooms once the holidays start to approach. So once summer has ended, you're approaching the fall months, you want to decrease that light to about 12 hours a day maximum to absolutely encourage blooming to start taking place. Now, one of the best ways to decrease that light is if you have windows in a garage or basement, you can put them not too close to that, but keep them in your garage or basement and just decrease that light level in that area. And you want to do this to about, I'd say about 4 to 6 weeks before the holidays start to begin, so you'll have them in that condition and they'll be ready to bloom because the plant itself realizes the time of year that it prefers blooming is approaching. Now, those cooler temperatures in the fall season in your basement or garage is a perfect time to take it in there because it's cooled down and the days should be a little bit easier on it. And also, it's going to be a little bit more ready to go into that cycle of blooming. Now, as you can see, there's some buds forming and it's getting ready to bloom, and it's okay to remove it from your garage or basement and then take it back to that window area. But remember, again, no direct sunlight even in the fall months, but it's been in that basement area of mine for about 5 weeks, and I think it's ready to go back into the finished area of the house. Now, I've taken an extra precautionary step moving it from my basement to my finished area of my house. I have a shelving area in my basement that has some grow lights on it, and I start to increase the light about a week or two before I decide to move it back to the finished area. Suddenly move it for that low light area to a bright sunny window could cause an issue called bud drop. So just remember, you want to increase the temperature just slightly and also have a little bit more light on it. So I'll link some grow lights that I really like down below, and also a small space heater that will bring up the temperature in your garage so there's not a complete shock and a chance of losing all of your buds forming and you won't have any flowers in the holiday season. Now, pruning is rarely needed for the Christmas cactus, but if it becomes too leggy and you have some extra long limbs coming out and you don't like the way it looks and you want to kind of shape it up, you can do that. It won't hurt it at all. As a matter of fact, doing that pruning may actually stimulate a little bit more growth, as it does with a lot of plants. Pruning does stimulate growth. Now, if you do want to upsize your pot, or you find that you really need to do that, there's an old gardener's trick about the soil that it's coming out of. Take a small amount of the soil that's in the native mother pot and then transfer that and add it to your new soil. That will help it get established more quickly and make sure that it stays in really optimal health. Now, depending on the variety that you've purchased, it may not bloom at the time you're thinking. Thus, that's why it's called the Easter cactus, because that particular variety is going to bloom around the Easter season. Thanksgiving cactus is going to obviously bloom earlier than the Christmas cactus. So make sure that you pay attention to the tag when you purchase it. I'll include some photographs in the video along with the titles of what type of cactus you're actually purchasing based upon the leaf structure. That's really the key to picking them and knowing exactly what type you're getting. So if you're wanting a Christmas cactus and you're purchasing an Easter cactus, you're going to be a few months off from actually getting your blooms. Now, propagating the Christmas cactus is really super simple. As you can see, the one on the right here has actually got some roots forming. This actually just fell off of the cactus and I didn't notice it, and it actually started to form roots completely sitting out of the soil. The one on the left has not formed any roots. But just remember, when you take the cuttings, sometimes it's better to take 3 of these leaves at one time, or actually 3 parts of the stem, and then allow the base to the wound to heal over about 3 to 4 days, and then put that bottom, if you take a cutting with 3 leaves on it, then take that bottom one and submerge that one into your new soil. But just remember, you want to allow that time for callusing to take place before you put it in the soil. Now, once the callus is formed on the base of your leaf section, if you just want to do one, you can do just one section if you have a small one, or you just want multiple cactuses. But you want to submerge that into the soil vertically. You don't want to lay it on its side. You want it to remain vertical and just allow it to form the roots. That will take anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks, but roughly about 30 days for the roots to form. And remember, it needs to be in cactus or bonsai soil. Now, if you've inherited a very large Christmas cactus or you purchased a very large Christmas cactus, you want to make sure that if you decide you want to do some pruning, that you never remove more than 1/3 of the total plant at any given time, because that can stress it and cause a lot of problems. I don't know if it would kill it, but it would definitely send it into a shock, and I would just avoid doing that. So I'd say roughly 1/3 is your maximum cutting on the Christmas cactus. So Christmas cactuses are extremely long-lived. There's some cactuses I've seen that lived over 200 years, and very many times people will pass these down within a family. So just remember that if it's taken care of, and you remember, don't overwater. That's the surest way to kill it, and the surest way you can prevent that from happening is your moisture meter. So just remember, this is an extremely long-lived plant. Now, there's a couple of really simple ways to tell if your Christmas cactus has been overwatered. If you see a lot of drooping leaves or you see a lot of wrinkling on the leaves, that means it's probably getting too much water. Now, I will be moving this from this plastic pots to a terracotta pot. You want to avoid plastic and metal pots because they're going to retain too much moisture. Now, terracotta pots are going to be your best option for your Christmas cactus. They're a breathable pot, and they're just going to be better overall. So just remember, opt for the terracotta in the long term, and make sure that it's not painted on the inside or the outside. Now, regardless of the 3 varieties that you have of the cactus we're talking about, there's a way to encourage blooming right before this expected bloom time. When you have it in that low light environment, cease watering for 30 days. Let's say you have a Christmas cactus and you want it to bloom at the end of November, right on cue. Make sure you stop that watering for the entire month of October. Now, one thing that can happen if you do overwater is you can get fungus gnats around your Christmas cactus. You'll notice the tiny little gnats flying around there. I've got a way to control that as well, and I'll put a link to a video that I made that specifically talks about fungus gnats. Now, once I transfer this to my terracotta pot, I'm making my own soil for that. I'm going to give you the recipe for that. It's 1/3 sphagnum moss, 1/3 cocoa coir, and 1/3 very small pine bark. The pine bark I purchased at a American big box store called Lowe's, and it comes in the bag, and it's called soil conditioner. The other 2 I just have shipped to me direct from Amazon. That's the easiest way for me to get it. I can't find cocoa coir that easy in my area, so I just order it, and it's not that expensive to have it sent right to me in a block. And once you add water to it, that small block explodes into quite a large amount. So I'll put the link to both of those down below. Now, one thing someone had sent me an image to in an email was a Christmas cactus that had kind of a reddish color on its flattened stems or leaves. And the reason for that reddish color is one of 2 things. Either it's getting too much sunlight or not enough water. So if you see that happening, that's probably one of the 2 causes. Now, I heat my house with natural gas in the wintertime, and the air can become extremely dry. And if that's the case with your house, whether you're heating with natural gas or some other source, if the air is too dry, one trick you can do is put your Christmas cactus in a bathroom window, if you have a bathroom window in that particular area that you use daily, and every time you take a shower or bath, it's going to spike the humidity in there, and that will also help it get through those really dry periods during the winter. Now, the reason I mentioned that about putting your Christmas cactus in that bathroom is because one reason that blooms and buds can fail to form and fail to flower is because the conditions are not optimal. So just remember, there's a lot of little variables inside your house that might cause it not to bloom. So if you want to make sure that happens, you want to make sure that you do get it a little bit of extra humidity, whether you're spraying it yourself or putting it in a room that has extra humidity like a bathroom, or if you have it near a small humidifier that cuts on at least once daily. Now, if you've just recently stopped in a garden center, we're approaching the holidays, and you see these, you think, okay, you're not exactly sure if it's not labeled. It's going to be one of 4 types of cactuses. And again, I mentioned I was going to put those pictures in there. So one of the types is going to be Thanksgiving, 2nd Christmas, 3rd Easter, and then maybe a general term might be a holiday cactus. So just remember that the place where you're shopping may not have it labeled, but again, identification is key through the leaves. So your Thanksgiving cactus and your Christmas cactus are cousins in the same family, and I'm going to show you a couple of photos of each. But the bloom times are based upon their type, but they can vary slightly with the level of care, so you need to take that into account too. You can also boost their blooming by adding a teaspoon of well-rotted compost, and that can help. I've often done that, and it's the same way that it kind of occurs in the rainforest. You'll have some debris falling into those crevices, and that is a natural thing that happens where they're growing. And so you're just kind of repeating that same process by putting that teaspoon into your Christmas cactus. Now, if you have the habit of overwatering like I do, I would recommend adding about 75% perlite to your soil, and that way it will drain even faster and you can prevent that root rot. Now, as far as repotting, it's not as vital as you'd think. Christmas cactus can spend decades in an appropriate sized pot. So if it's just an average sized pot, no need to upsize the pot. But if it's a very, very small pot, then you might want to consider upsizing. But again, a standard sized pot, maybe about the same size as a gallon nursery pot, you're perfectly okay leaving it in there for quite a long time. You want to never repot more frequently than every 3 years. Don't do it every year. Wait 3 years and see what the health of the tree, or excuse me, see what the health of the Christmas cactus looks like. The best time to fertilize is in the springtime, April through June, once per month with a cactus fertilizer. But you want to make sure that you don't fertilize just before the blooming season or even during the blooming season, as that might cause bud drop and it not to flower during those times that it normally would. Now, the best time to actually prune is after the blooms have dropped. So you want to make sure that that has already taken place, the flowers have all dropped, and then you can go ahead and prune if you desire, or you can take cuttings at that point. Now, if you just purchase your Christmas cactus from the big box store, a grocery store, or a flower shop, it's not uncommon to get it home and the buds to drop. So it's not that it's unhealthy, but it's just going through a little bit of a shock from being changed from one environment to the other. It may have been in the big box store for a short amount of time, and now it's coming to your house. So that's one thing, that sudden change in environments from in a perfect optimal situation to two different types of environments, when it finally comes to its final home, it's going to cause a little bit of a shock. So don't be surprised if you do lose your buds right before a holiday. Unfortunately, it's just something that happens some of the time. Now, as I said earlier, I am planning on repotting this, but what I am going to do is I'm going to wait till the blooming cycle is over, and then I'm going to repot. So remember, when you just purchase this, you get it home and you think, I want to put it into a terracotta pot. Wait till the blooming cycle is over, and then you can place it in a terracotta pot. If you want to show it off for the holidays and you don't want to show the kind of unattractive pot, you can put the pot inside of another pot and put soil around it until the holidays are over, and then the blooms drop, and then you can repot it into the terracotta pot. Now, someone had sent me an email asking me about what if you live in a very small apartment and you don't have a garage or a place to store it in darkness. Well, you can use a laundry basket. This one's holes is a little bit on the large side, but you could do that. Just place it under the laundry basket. You could put a towel maybe on both sides where the lights are going to come in from one side. You want to keep it in maximum darkness, but you also want to have airflow. So this is a trick you could do to help reduce that light right before bloom time starts in that 4 to 6 week period. And also, if you do have a room that you could have where no heating was happening, that cooler temperature will also help. Also, if you want to do this in a closet, you could do that as well. Just don't forget to water. Now, if you want to increase the length of time for blooming and they've started to fade, you can deadhead and remove those particular blooms and allow that energy to go to the other blooms, and it will slightly extend the blooming time and even help the blooms perform a little bit better and a little bit larger. Now, if you decide to propagate your Christmas cactus and you want to take a cutting, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 sections, make sure you use a heated seed starting mat. That's going to help encourage the success and the growth of those roots. That's one of those things you don't want to forget. I'll put a link to one of these down below, but that's one little trick that I've found that when I didn't use the heated mat, it did not work quite as well. They're still pretty easy to do without the mat, but your success rate and growth rate is going to be even better and faster. Now, I've got a homemade recipe that I sometimes use when I have the time to make it, and it's usually somewhere around the greenhouse. I just put a little bit on there, but I'll put a link to that. It's made from eggshells, and it really helps with the calcium, which is what this plant will really benefit from. So I'll link that up above. So guys, if you do decide to get one of these plants, it's really rewarding, as it just performs well each year if it's properly cared for. And this plant will probably outlive us all if it's well taken care of. So just consider getting one. If you've got one, I hope it will help you take better care of it. If you found something helpful, useful, or you like the video, I hope you'll like and subscribe, because it really helps the channel. And guys, have a great day.